Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, we're going to do a fast and loose tonalist landscape painting based off of a photograph. This photo was taken by Colin Woodward. He's a gentleman from the UK. He is part of the Ranson Facebook page, and he posts a lot of his work, but he also posts a lot of photographs and reference material for all of us to use. So if you're interested in fast and loose painting styles and you like these photo references, check out the Ron Ranson Disciple Facebook page. I'm a moderator for it, and it's a really great community. We share a lot of information with each other, and we have beginners all the way up to experts on that page. So really great page. Come check it out. That being said, I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. It is 100% cotton, 140 pound, cold press. I coated it with water right before I turned the camera on. When it had shipped to me, that edge was kind of torn on this one. So, but I don't think it should make much of a difference if this one winds up getting matted. Now, I'm gonna try to push this in an old master's tonalist approach, as opposed to kind of a colorist approach. Bright, cheery colors are just not for me when it comes to painting. It's just not in my bag of tricks. It's not something that I do often. So I'm going to start with raw sienna. I'm going to utilize this to map out the scene. We have that far distance, and if you look close, there's some other land on the other side of that. We come up into this mountain hill region with our trees, our water body, and the beach will slope here, and then we have this nice hill rolling in this direction. Very reminiscent of the landscape painters of the 1800s, having this hill that they're painting from, looking from, and looking down, seeing a whole scene. So there's a lot going on in it. The sky itself is pretty just ultramarine, but I think we'll play around and get some diversity in it. I think one thing that I had read in a book, of course, yeah, so I read it in a book, and it was on Claude Lorraine, and it was just discussing some pieces that were in an exhibit, talking about whether they were originals or not. There's a lot of imposters painting Claude Lorraine's works during his time period, and one of the things that they said was, they could kind of identify some of the periods that he had painted in, whether it was earlier or later, based on the fact if there was a lot of angles being used to create a sense of depth, as opposed to other techniques. So a lot of the angles here can help create that linear perspective and create depth into it. I'm going to strengthen up my ultramarine. Right now I have kind of a vertical gradient. I'll grab some Prussian blue. Get a little bit of that cooler aspect there. Grab some Prussian blue, and I'll start feeding in a little bit of my water. Just massing things in, mapping it out, creating that underpainting. Let's see. So I have the vertical change, but I want to have a left to right change within it. So I think what will be interesting is I'm just going to pick a side and get it a little bit darker, tonality wise, a little bit more chroma. Trying to hide my brush strokes here. You could have fun and play with a lot of different brush strokes in the sky and just get that movement. You can see some of those where I'm kind of going on that angle, doing that X shape with it. Just trying to get interest and diversity. Then paper towel. I'm going to pull some of these clouds out. That's also going to help create that sharper edge for that mountain later on. Let me switch to a different paper towel. Like the blue shop rags, for me they are just perfectly absorbent and work really well. So pull along that edge there. And I could throw some raw sienna mixed into this, a little darker aspects of the clouds. So the raw sienna and the ultramarine will give a grayish feel to it. That's all I want. I'll let the clouds go across the whole image. Pull out some more highlights. And we're just going with the flow. Okay. Now my water mass, I'm going to grab more Prussian blue. If you don't have Prussian blue, you can probably replace it with phthalo blue. But honestly, there's really no need to get specific with colors. This is that bottom edge that's coming up there. Mix the Prussian blue with the raw sienna, mainly since I just have it on the brush. Get kind of a green. Gives you some of that kind of Vicks Vapor Rub menthol-y type green that you see whenever you use the phthalo. We're going to wind up having a tree mass here, and we recede back into these different shapes. I'm going to wind up taking some artistic liberties, and I'll try to explain what I'm doing. Oh, and of course you're welcome to follow along with anything that I do. And like I said, the original photo of this can be found on the Ron Ranson Disciples Facebook page by Mr. Colin Woodward. I'm flattening my paper out. I want to now start looking at the distance. I'm going to grab some ultramarine with light red oxide. This is my go-to for a background dark purple or light purple. Just a fading back that's taking place. In this scene, there's a slight softening and lightening that takes place as we go back into it. I'm going to push that and create my own sense of atmospheric perspective. What happens is when you look into the distance, you have veils upon veils of the atmosphere, air, water, all the other things that just make up the air between us and other objects, creating these veils that slowly weed out your yellows, then weed out your reds, and last you're left with blues. But on a really nice day like this, where he's out and about taking these photos, it looks like you can see for miles, and you're not getting much of that atmospheric effect taking place. So I'm just going to start forcing that. I'm going to grab some burnt umber, because I want to start going into my darker, earthy tones. I can mix ultramarine blue into this for my darks. A lot of people will use raw sienna mixed with, burnt sienna mixed with ultramarine for their dark. I'm a big fan of the burnt umber and the ultramarine. Essentially, a lot of earth tones will give you kind of darker grays, mixing those two together. I didn't have a large quantity of ultramarine, so it's just more on the brown side. Just mapping everything in. This is that tree that's going to come up here. I'm going to throw in some gambage. The pronunciation of that eludes me, and I've been meaning to look it up just to start seeing it. Bless you, Percy. Percy, my kitten, is down below the art table sneezing. She's been having a little allergy issues. But she turns 2 tomorrow. I'm really excited about that. So you see how I put this mass in? It's green, but it's, as we go from the top to the back, it's all the same green. So we lose the atmospheric perspective and the linear perspective there because of that. So we could either start muting this down, which is my goal. We could start changing the strength, etc. Let's get some of this in the foreground. Over here is going to be that tree. I'm going wet and wet, and then I'll go a little bit stronger over it whenever we do a dry off. One of the tricks to painting is knowing what your weaknesses are. And my weakness is just building trees bigger and bigger and bigger until they take over the whole scene. So I really need to make sure I restrict myself in that regard. Here is the shadow. I threw some Payne's gray with it. If I'm going too fast, you can pause, or on YouTube you could even slow down the playback rate of a video. It'll make my voice sound wonky, but you could play it at half speed. You could probably play it at quarter speed to see it. And stretch out a video, which will probably be about 30 minutes to an hour or more if you'd like. So just little tricks for videos if we're painting too fast. I keep going back to that green in that background. All right, I'm going to set the brush down. I want to pull back some in different spots. So here's the cliff edge right here. Pull out some of that sand. Pull out some of that sand here. We could even bring some of our marks and use the towel. Lighten around the edges. I'm going to clean that edge up a little bit. You can leave it where it's bleeding into the sky. Let me know if you like that as opposed to me kind of pulling that out there. I'm curious what y'all think. And now, let's see if there's anything we can do before we go any further. In the wet and wet phase, you can scrape. And if you use the sharp point of a scraping tool, you're going to just mar the paper and it's going to backfill. And essentially, that's what I'm doing here. It's just creating a little bit of texture, creating some dark lines, letting that backfill occur. You can use the rounded edge, and with enough pressure for the wider line, you can pull out some whites. This is back to the sharp edge, just to get some branches going. And I can come back in with the #1 rigger later on. And put branches in as well. Here's the round edge, and you can see how we pull back to some white and some spots. Pull out that rocky surface here. And take artistic licenses and freedoms. What you decide to put in and what you decide to leave out is all up to the artist, and it shows the artist's hand. So little things like that go a long way. This is a scraping tool made by Mr. Mark. He's a fellow that comments on the YouTube page. He's generously sent me this tool that he had made, and I use it from time to time depending on the type of mark that I want. You can essentially use it as a palette knife and push things around. I'm just using it to get some ideas of where everything's going to go. There is a light area in that far distance on the water. So I'm going to pull that up now. Okay. All right, I am going to pause the camera and do a dry off. Pay attention to how everything softens, and then we're going to play on top of this. All right, so use the blow dryer to dry off. Feels a little cool in some areas, so it's probably still damp in some spots, but I'm not worried too much. Going to use a squirrel mop to now play with this background. All right, so this is the number 10 Silver Atelier Squirrel Blend Quill. I think I got it off of Blick. I'm going to take light red oxide and ultramarine to mix up that distant purple that I've talked about. This is for the far distant landmass back in here. And I've just taken to using the quill for parts like this rather than the rigger. I guess a round or a small flat would work as well. I'm just tossing that in, and I can change the color a little bit, the tonal value, and just feed into that wet and wet just to play with it. Once I kind of set that tone, it's going to affect the rest of what we're working with, because now we go into that cliff face. Which is going to come closer in the picture plane. So we have the cliff face. It has that little landmass coming out from it. And we come around. I think I'm going to grab some yellow ochre. Hey, Hammy. I don't know if I mentioned, but I got a new stool for the art room. I picked up at Walmart. The top of it, it's about an inch or two higher than my other stool. And having used that stool for at least 4 years has thrown me off quite a bit. Now there's that white foam of the surf here. I'm curious how we can pull back to that. I may go into some white gouache there. I'm going to work my way up into that hill and play with a variety of tones. You have that tree mass there. You could chase all these fields and play around with them. The brushstroke direction will help it read. I'll try to warm this guy up, or at least strengthen its tonal value so it's a little bit closer. comes up here. We have a grouping of trees. I think I might go in and do kind of some stippling in that spot to give the idea that we can see some of the parts of the trees. This is still me kind of underpainting, just mapping out these areas. And I think it'd be fine to grab a little bit of lemon yellow, pushing away from that tonalist point of view and going to that colorist stuff, which I had said in the beginning I wasn't really gonna focus on. But I'm just using that for depth. I can really grab that lemon yellow and play in this foreground. Probably good to switch to the hake for here. We have our tree right there, so I'm going to switch to the hake. Let's give that sideways slanting grass growing into the picture, going up to the right kind of feel. Throw some lemon yellow in there for a little bit of variety. For me, lemon yellow gets overpowered very, very quickly. But I am using kind of a student grade. I'm not sure if the higher quality lemon yellows stand a chance either. But if you're really wanting that yellow, I would look into the cadmium hues. A little bit more opacity to them. You can mix it, this lemon yellow, with white gouache if you want it to stand out over where we're painting. So there's a few different things you can do. Some Payne's gray. I think just paper towel texture will break up the mass. Then we have this tree, and I mentioned it a moment ago. Let's stipple this fella in with his foliage. And I'll come back with branches and scrapes in a moment. But I'm going to now look at this guy. When I was doing the dry off, there was something important that came to mind. Here's my horizon line, and here's where my foliage starts. I really don't want that together. And in the picture, it actually has the foliage start lower. So doing that will just help with a better composition. Whenever you have lines like that meet up, you want to try to force them to break. And I made the mistake of letting it happen. In the picture, it wasn't like that. You can go a little darker on the inside leaves, where it's going to catch less light. So that's just Payne's gray to make things easy for me. And I'm going to grab the number 4 rigger. And this guy I'm going to use for tree trunks, branches. I might switch to the 1. I just feel like there's some bigger things I need to put in at the moment. I want to make sure I'm happy with how it's going in. This guy has that bigger port. Come in. Grabbing the number 1. You really don't need those 2 different ones. It's just a matter of ease for the video. So I think I said this should be about a 30-minute video. But whenever I paint from a photograph, I always wind up painting a little bit longer. Just Payne's gray and burnt umber. Putting that shadow in, catching my shadows that come up here. Putting in that dark underside. This guy coming up and out. I think we'll scrape and benefit from scraping. scrape. Just kind of going willy-nilly, just creating texture there, creating texture. Now I think it'd be time to do a dry off and create a third pass. All right, so we're still a little cool from the blow dryer, but we should be good. I grabbed a second container of water because I believe I will start using some whitewash in some areas. Let's see. I'll leave the background the way it is. I want to now work that hill. So I'm remixing my distant purple, and I'm going to grab some burnt sienna in there to warm it up a little bit. Try to just get marks and variation into these masses. You can leave them as a solid mass if you'd like. It's just a matter of preference and style. In fact, let me know below what you prefer. You see these vertical brush strokes on an angle to show our slope of that hill. Comes out. I don't like that gap right there between that. I think that's relatively common in watercolor and it's fast and loose, but that's just personal aesthetic preferences. And I had talked about how I wanted to get a little bit more almost definition of trees back in here. Let's ultramarine. Let's go ultramarine raw sienna. A little bit of Payne's gray. About 3 weeks ago, I did a study of Thomas Girton's. Yeah, Hammy, we're talking about Thomas Girton. Yeah. What'd you think about that, Hammy? He has lots of opinions on different artists. Yeah, you have lots of opinions on different artists, don't you? So, Thomas Girton, Above Bolton was the name of the painting, I believe. And there was a few different ones that had popped up whenever I had searched it. I think that is because he did numerous studies or numerous parts from that scene. Anywho, the reason I bring it up is that his mid-ground trees on the hill had the darkest tonal value as opposed to everything else, which really just struck a chord with me. Right, Hammy? If you want to be on my lap, there you go. Alright, so we're painting around Hammy now. So that tonal value in that mid-ground being the darkest really stood out to me and made me think about my approach. Because personally, I will take my tonal values and go from light to dark as I go from back to forward. Some lemon yellow for these kind of crisper fields. No trees in that field whatsoever. Grab a little bit of ultramarine blue. A little bit warmer water, or darker water as we get closer. Horizontal strokes in order to create that plane. I washed the brush off just now and just kind of used water to pull it up some. Doing something like this, darkening the water, may help lead to the illusion of this foam being lighter, but we will resign ourselves to using white gouache. If you've never painted around a cat, I highly recommend trying it. It's kind of like a boxer fighting with one arm tied behind his back, building up the texture of this tree, the texture of the landscape in front of us where we're looking out over the hill. And we're going to build up the texture of the tree here. As well. I'm going to force more darks into this tree. Just going burnt umber, Payne's gray. You don't want to be watching Payne anymore, Hammy? I gotta find out when Hammy's birthday is. I think he will be 4. But Percy's is tomorrow. Hammy, you're my best bud, right? Right, Hammy? Payne's gray, just some darker marks. I'm gonna have to do another dry off, and we'll do another front to back. But I think we're at 30 minutes now. I'll take a look. All right, Hammy, time to get down. Daddy's gotta stand up. Okay, I'm gonna pause and do a dry off. We're 32 minutes in. All right, so as you can see, I have a container of water and a small little palette tray on my painting, which might seem a little blasphemous, but I like to put the gouache in a separate container. You could find these little containers at Asian markets for $1 or $2, and they're just really great for just small things. That being said, I do that because the chalkiness of the gouache has a tendency to contaminate the palette and get mixed up with everything. So, my brush is not clean. We're going to put some of this gouache along here. This is Da Vinci brand, which I think Mind of Watercolor had done experiments on different brands of gouache and their opacity. And I think this was on the lower side of opacity. I know that it is on the cheaper end in regards to your different gouaches, white gouaches, but I'm a big fan of the Da Vinci brand and what it puts out and their price range, so I like it and I'm willing to support that. Just throwing in a little white for the buildings here, and we might overlap some of them with some trees. I had debated putting these in at all, but now that I have the white out, it's really a good time to start experimenting. If I pull some of my sky blue, I'm just going to throw it over here and pull some gouache. I've been playing around with taking that color and putting it over trees. It's kind of sort of like Cezanne, where he would take the sky color and paint it over the tree and vice versa. I think it was very just obvious where he did that. I haven't looked at Cezanne's work in the longest time. I was a big fan of the Impressionists and the Expressionists in college, but then I backtracked to the different time periods. Let's see if there's any other places we can play around with this white gouache before we put it away. Well, if something pops up, I'll grab it more. Grab some more of it. I had a very interesting tea today. Taking the number 1 rigger, placing over and passing it, having fun. It, I think I pronounced the factory in China wrong. It's like Zhaiguan would be like the phonetically looking at it and pronouncing it. I think it's like Chaguan. They have a sub-brand, like Boyan. I think it means Tibetan Flame, or what they put out under that sub-brand is Tibetan Flame. And they sell these bricks of tea to Tibet, to the monasteries, to the people there. And it's pu'er tea. It's a aged tea. A cheap aged tea compared to all other aged teas. Anyway, I tried that today. For the first time I finally got it in. I was excited. And after 3 infusions, I was like, oh wow, I'm ramped up. Like the caffeine and energy levels was definitely there. What I like experimenting with, so I'm putting this in, playing around. I'm going to grab some, bring that up higher. Just trying to get some texture. And with the wet and wet, I like to throw a little bit of white gouache on top and just kind of let that spread around. It just gives an interesting texture effect. So it's something I've just been kind of exploring, seeing if I like the texture, but I enjoy it. Joe Menza has been really good with his white gouache lately in the skies, giving the illusion of clouds, the wispy clouds with gouache. I'm going to bring more out in this tree. Just going dark here, just Payne's Gray, just to get it done. Then, see, this is the same tone as that tree, so it might push forward in the picture plane, so I have to be careful here. So I'm just trying to place some trees and stuff on top of that. That ridge goes back. Put a little interest on this ridge, this little outcropping. Just get a little variety on that beach coming forward. Okay, pause and dry off. All right, now it's the fiddle and wrap everything up stage. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, follow. If you have any questions or comments, if you'd like to do anything or approach anything, let me know in the comments below. I do have the Patreon if you'd like to support this channel. I also have other means of supporting the channel through the links below. That helps with supplies and other materials and exploration of different mediums. So I appreciate all my Patreon supporters. Thank you all so much. Of course, you are always welcome to follow along with any one of these. You are, of course, welcome to sign your own name to anything that you do whenever you follow one of my tutorials. and you have my express permission to sell anything you do when you follow along with one of these videos. I want you all to be successful, to have fun, and to have money for art supplies. If you haven't noticed, things are getting a little bit more expensive, and the free shipping amount that you have to order is getting higher than usual. To make things simple, I'm just going to take a micron pen just to throw some birds in. And then we'll sign down below. Oh, and I don't know if I've mentioned, but I do have plenty of social media, so if you follow along, feel free to tag me in it. I'd love to see your results, or shoot me a message showing me your results. It's always fun seeing that. So I hope you enjoyed. Thank you again to Mr. Colin Woodward for putting this photo online and allowing us to use that. Check us out over on Ranson Disciples on Facebook. Y'all take care and have a great day. Bye.